Hi, and welcome to a chat with Evelyn Wood, a third-party candidate running to fill the New York State 114th District Assembly seat being vacated by Dan Steck. I'm Jared Stam, editor at Manchester Media, and I'm being joined by our reporters Jay Mullen and Austin Crozier. We're happy to be sitting down together in our offices today to discuss the issues facing the residents of the 114th District and Ms. Wood's positions and plans. Evelyn, thank you for being with us today.
I'm very happy to be here today.
Terrific. Let's get started. So I'll ask the first question. Why are you running for assembly, and what do you bring to the table that your fellow candidates do not?
I'm running for the assembly position because I really feel very strongly that we need a strong voice for the North Country. With Betty Little's retirement, we're losing a strong voice in the North Country, and I hope to be the next strong voice for the North Country. As far as what I bring to the table that the other candidates don't, I think the most important thing is experience. I'm the only candidate that's built an internet system to resolve the many issues we have with broadband and just general internet connectivity. I'm also the only person that's running that has ever handled a natural disaster and gone back and forth with FEMA and the state emergency services to get those issues resolved, and not only to replace the infrastructure that was damaged, but also to have it mitigated for future. So like we enlarged bridges so that in the future they don't keep wiping out, and I have experience doing all of those things. I think they're very big issues in our district, and I have that experience, which none of the other candidates actually have.
Remind me with the natural disaster.
We had the flood in May of 2011. We had over $7 million of damages in the town of Thurman, knocked out roads, bridges. It was quite devastating for the town, and we managed to completely replace all of those roads and bridges. We expanded 3 bridges, and we never raised taxes to do it.
Okay, good, thank you very much.
Again, Austin Crozier with the Granville Sentinel. My first question for you is, what does growing up in the Adirondack region say about your character and determination to guarantee action for your constituents and residents of the 114th District?
So I'm not sure if you guys know, but I still live right where I was born and grew up. Technically I was born in the Glens Falls Hospital, but I was only there for like 24 hours, then I came home. And so we have an old Adirondack family farm. It's a hardscrabble farm. And I started working the fields as soon as my parents could take me out there. At 5, my father was putting a brick on the lever for a horse-drawn dump rake so that I could start riding the dump rake. And when you're working on a farm, you don't quit. You have to work until it's over. You have to be planning ahead. You have to be thinking about what could be going wrong in the future, what the weather's going to bring. And that, I think, has strongly shaped my entire life. We're just hard workers, and we work until it's over. Sometimes there's a problem. Obviously, I'm not exactly the strongest person in the world, but you still have to, a board comes off the barn, you still have to get up there and fix it. And so you have to kind of have a little bit of ingenuity and look outside the box for solutions to problems that sometimes might seem insurmountable at the time. And so I think that is one of my strongest points, is it's given me some tenacity and some problem solving skills.
So, Jay Mullen with the Whitehall Times. So on your website, you outline 3 issues facing the 114th district. You outline, higher, taxes, infrastructure, and environmental challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I noticed wasn't on there was anything to do with any sort of healthcare issues or any sort of healthcare reform that you might feel needs to be done. And I'm just curious as to what your stance on the state of the healthcare system is, and what actions you feel should or need to.
Okay. So I am currently working in the healthcare industry, and there are a number of changes that could be made to make it more efficient, particularly the Medicaid program. I'm going to say there's a lot of waste, and I'm not saying that to be mean or say that anybody's doing anything wrong, but there's inefficiencies in the Medicaid system that can definitely be addressed, particularly with regard to claim submissions from physicians' offices to the Medicaid for reimbursement. It drives up costs for the healthcare providers, and I'm certain that it's driving up costs on the state side as well by continually having to relook at the same claim 6 and 8 times. That's a huge inefficiency, and it certainly could be remediated. There's a number of ways to do that. I'm not going to say that any one is better than the other, but I will say that the system, they don't use current claim forms. They have their own particular claim form. So, that's a difficult situation for the offices. They have to have special submissions. You can't appeal. There's a number of things with Medicaid that could be rectified, and I think that would help close the budget gap as well, because, as you know, Medicaid was a huge portion of the budget gap this spring.
What is your feeling about the organizations like Hudson Headwaters, who are opening up small regional, offices and places for people to go that are closer? What's the closest healthcare facility to Thurman?
To Thurman, most people use the Warrensburg Health Center, which, as you know, underwent an upgrade not too many years ago,
Right.
and it's a much larger facility, offers a lot more services now. And depending where you are in Thurman, you might also use the smaller facility that they have in North Creek.
Okay.
It just depends. I'm happy to see them expand and offer smaller facilities in all of the different little towns. Like, I know they have one up in Indian Lake, and I think that expansion is a good thing. It certainly serves a need, because it is sometimes very difficult to get transportation all the way down to the next nearest. If you were previous to opening in Indian Lake, you might have to come all the way down to Warrensburg, and sometimes that poses a real restriction for people who have difficulty. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not looking into it. If you have difficulty with travel or just getting around, maybe you don't have a license, or you're an elderly person who is no longer driving, it can be very restrictive on your access to healthcare. So I am glad to see them putting the smaller ones up. I'd love to see them be a little bit more robust in their offerings. I mean, Warrensburg now has X-ray, ultrasound, a much more robust amount of services they can offer, and I'd like to see that spread further north as well. Hopefully serve more of the northern portion of the district.
So broadband connectivity is a huge issue in our region, as you know.
It is.
We've been working remotely.
Yes, I am
since
as
the
well.
pandemic, since it began, and you're a proponent of white space internet. That's one of the things that I know that you
White space is what I built.
Okay.
It was the best solution for our particular problem at the time.
So tell me about that, because I don't know if everybody knows what that is.
All right, so white space basically uses the old TV channels that you used when you had your rabbit ear antennas.
Right.
They're not being used. That portion of the spectrum is not currently being used. Everything's gone over to digital. So it's just out there, and you can use that to get internet. You can send wireless internet essentially across it. So at the time, given our topography, we're very mountainous in Thurman, it did not block the signal. It kind of went up and around in the leaves, in the Adirondack Park, lots of leaves. So leaves were not a problem for it either. So we used that. We did a very inexpensive, it was basically we put a little ad in the Adirondack Journal that said, hey, if you don't have internet, let us know at the town hall, and people called in. It was a very informal study. We figured out where the biggest area of need was, and then from there, we located a place to backhaul, because you do have to backhaul your internet into something. Frontier had a trunk line running through town, right in that area.
Okay.
We were able to obtain backhaul through there, and essentially, because there are height limits in the Adirondack Park, we just put our transmitter on a telephone pole. It was completely within the APA restrictions. Most people don't even know the boxes are there. And then basically we bounced it from pole to pole and served an area of up to 80 homes with high-speed internet. It's not the right solution for every situation, but it was the right solution for our area. I am very excited to see Slick moving down through. They've been delayed a little bit, but I'm hoping to see them finish up. But I feel very strongly, particularly now, never has it been so important that we get broadband. I know it's been talked about, and everybody says, yes, we should do it. But I think we really need someone in there with experience in actually having done it to kind of push it along a little bit more than it has. It's wonderful to talk about it, and I'm glad that the awareness is raised, but we're past that point now. We need to actually start pushing construction forward and making that a priority.
So the next question I have is, how comfortable should residents of the 114th District feel with you as a member of the Assembly with issues such as maintaining and creating infrastructure?
I think that they should be very comfortable, just based alone on the track record of having created, maintained, and expanded infrastructure. And not just the internet, which I consider internet to be as basic as a utility as electric or phone. It really is in this days and age. I know the state doesn't necessarily define it as a utility, but I believe it should be. But I have a proven track record of working with our highway departments and the county, as well as the state, and getting large projects done. There was one particular bridge we could not replace. FEMA would not fund it because the road was a horseshoe shape, so it was not necessary for access. When we had all those floods, so for about a year, we struggled with how to do it. And I was able to liaise with the county to obtain state funding. They were working on a road near there, and they were going to have to create a diversion. It would have been like $400,000 for a temporary bridge. And by getting together with the then DPW superintendent and my highway superintendent, we were able to redirect those funds, replace the bridge that we lost, and then use that horseshoe shape as the diversion. So rather than spend $400,000 on something that we were going to put in and then tear back out, we spent it on permanent infrastructure, and were able to restore a road that had been previously destroyed. So again, that's where I think innovative thinking and dedication to your infrastructure. If your roads and bridges aren't good, your community's going to suffer for it. So it's important to everyone.
So reducing high taxes in the 114th district is one of your highest concerns.
Yes.
How do you plan to negotiate with other representatives in the state and local governments to make sure that this happens, and how confident are you in your ability to make use of and expand on your connections?
I think that I'm fairly confident, as much as any new member of the assembly can be confident and influential. I think one of the things to do is to try to select. You're obviously not going to go in and overhaul the entire state budget your first session, and that's not going to happen, but you can select priority items. One of the priority items that I'd like to look at is we have a tendency when we do the state budget to raid the road and bridge fund to fund the general fund, and that's historically trended. They've done some audits and stuff. I'd like to see if we can't stop doing that and then be able to shift more of that money back over to repair of the roads, which would help with the DPW and the state highway budgets as well. I'm sure they would be happy to get the funding back. But I do think we need to get in there and kind of look at it. It's not one of those things where you can go in and just slash tons and tons of stuff, but we do need to start taking a harder look at it. I'd also like to see the state maintain the same restrictions as the towns and the counties do with regards to the tax cap. That has always been something that bothers me. The state will always say, well, we stay under the 2% limit. They did, but that's not what the limit is for the towns and the counties, and I think if they expect the towns and the counties to do it, we should have the state doing the same thing, and it would kind of galvanize them, I think, to take a harder look at the budgets.
What are your stances on police and bail reform? Both Matt Simpson and Claudia Bramer have stated that they are in full support of law enforcement.
Well, I was the chair of the emergency services in the police department and oversaw the jail while I was on the county board of supervisors. I cannot say how much I support the hard work that those law enforcement people do. The dangers and the stresses of the job are so intense. So yes, they have my wholehearted support. And I think I missed part of your question.
Bail reform.
Bail reform.
Yeah.
Now I'm completely against bail reform. I'm very upset that bail reform passed, and then it was very quiet after bail reform passed, right up until January, when of course it became election season, and then of course everything took effect, and now everybody is upset, and everybody's saying, see, bail reform is bad. Bail reform was bad when it passed. We waited 8 months to actually come out strongly against it, and I think that if the Republicans thought that it was so bad, they should have started screaming back when it first passed, not waited till January. Unfortunately, I think that bail reform is being used as a political tool with regard to campaigns, not so much because it is truly a bad thing that needs to be, I would like to see it completely repealed and then reworked. I'm not going to say that there might not be some areas where, yes, there may be some reform needed for bail, but I think this was too big of a broad stroke, and it's had very terrible consequences. So I'd like to see it fully repealed. I don't think we will actually see that. I think the best that we can hope for is to actually hopefully get in there and make some changes and start to put some reins on that a little bit, because right now it's just a runaway as far as the effects on communities. It's particularly in the southern part of the state. I don't know that in our district it has been quite the problem that it has been for the southern portion of the state.
Local businesses have taken a strong hit due to the consequences of COVID-19. As a member of the Assembly, how would you aim to assist business owners in small towns who have struggled from a situation nobody truly prepared for or deserved?
Good, nobody did deserve that. I second that. The small businesses have had a terrible time of it. I've watched so many in my own community. I've watched small farms fold. It has been just tragic for all of them. I think what we need to do, and of course by the time the election takes place, I'm sure that things will be different. It's a very, very changeable thing. There may be a spike this fall. We're not sure what's going to happen. But I really think in order to address that, you have to kind of segment off your businesses, because a small business that's a restaurant versus a small business that's a farm, the steps that you would need to take would be different for each one. But I really do think that according, I don't want to say genre, but category, perhaps we would need to take a harder look and see what we can do to assist them. A lot of the small businesses that say maybe are restaurants might have been able to, if they had been able to get some outdoor seating and tents and heaters where they could socially distance outside, it might have helped their businesses stay open. But unfortunately, a lot of small businesses don't have that kind of overhead, so they can't lay it out. And I think that looking for solutions to help them stay open and continue to bring in revenue would be the right thing to do, but you're going to have to base it largely on what the aim of the business is.
So to kind of bounce off of that, more generalized, but what is your position on COVID-19 in terms of the regulations that have been coming from Governor Cuomo's office?
I don't disagree with everything that the governor has said. I having been in office myself, I know that a lot of times what we hear out in the public is not what they necessarily know behind the scenes. They have access to a lot of stuff that we're just never going to know about. So he may or may not be making those decisions based on information that we just don't have. I don't agree with all of it. I was looking at one of the executive orders the other day regarding reporting for contact tracing. And so they said, before you administer a COVID test, you have to state where you've been and which school you've been and all of that stuff. But then further down in the executive order, it said, and that the initial information collected is supposed to be reported to the departments of health, the appropriate authorities. But then they say, well, you have to take and collect all that information and send it to the laboratory. But what does the laboratory do with it? If the doctor administering the test has already gotten that information and turned it over to the appropriate authorities, why would you need to collect it a second time and send it to the lab? And what is the lab doing with that? As far as protected health information and those kind of things, I have concerns about small things like that make you kind of wonder, like, what are we doing with that information precisely? Is it being collected somewhere? I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong with it, but being very conscious of HIPAA regulations and protected health information and just generally the right to privacy of the citizens, I'd like to know a little bit more about what drives some of those smaller sentences in some of those executive orders.
So there's a tagline on your website, which is all over the website, which is good. Common sense, proven results. And just tell us the significance that statement makes to your campaign.
I think we need to put common sense back in government. There's a lot of grandiose ideas going on, but the practical administration that really government needs to focus on is falling by the wayside. And so I think we need to put some common sense, some good old fashioned, all right, what do we need to do, and let's get this actually done and move along, back into play. As far as expanding roads and internet, I have done it. Mm-hmm. We're not electing, if I'm elected, you're not electing someone that says, okay, I'm gonna improve we've elected a lot of people that are gonna, change the internet, and we're all gonna have internet. But we have never actually elected somebody who has actually built an internet system. I've worked with the state broadband office. We have communications there. I know the practical realities of how difficult it is to build the internet and what the challenges are. So for me, you want to take that common sense and that knowledge and put it to work for the people of the district. And it's, I think, important that people see results. People are very frustrated People are very angry. They're struggling. Their kids are struggling. They're deeply concerned about their families and what's going to happen next. And I really think that we don't need any more just pontification and then getting in office and then there you are and you might pass a few bills and it's lovely and you're not accomplishing anything. I'm a very driven, very focused individual. I'm extremely detail oriented, and it is something that I would bite onto and really put a lot of effort into dragging, if I had to, the rest of the assembly right along with me, or shaming them into it, because quite frankly, people cannot wait for politicians to get around to happening to, well, maybe now we'll expand the internet. We're kind of 11th hour. Schools are shutting down right now and sending kids home again. I know Warrensburg School, they've got dozens and dozens of kids that once they send them home, they don't hear from them anymore. And it's not because the parents or the kids don't want to do it. There's no cell service, there's no internet. These kids are getting left behind because the state hasn't moved ahead. And I as a parent, struggled with it this spring. I was moved to work from home. I have 2 children at home on the internet, and the internet couldn't handle it. Bogged down, knocked out. My oldest daughter couldn't take her math final. She's panicking. I'm trying to work at the same time. It was crazy. We need people who are going to get in there and actually make effort to get it done. Not just say, yes, maybe now we should work on it. I got a flyer in the mail 5 days before school started that said, now's the time to start working on the internet. The time to start working on the internet was in March when they shut down schools and we all knew we were moving to home. Waiting until 5 days before school started and sending a mailer will never fix the problem that the families are facing now. But it takes so long to build the internet, and it doesn't matter which kind you use. Mm-hmm. So we need people who are going to get in there and really bite into it, and quite frankly, squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I'm not afraid to complain bitterly for as long as it takes to whoever I have to interface with. I will work tirelessly to get it done. It is a huge issue. And so, you just need somebody who's going to get in there and apply common sense and get some work done.
So you and your fellow candidate, Matt Simpson, both have experience as town supervisors. Mm-hmm. What attributes do you feel that you bring to the table based on that experience, and why should someone look to your experience over that of Simpson?
Well, known Matt since he was a town councilman. He's a nice guy. So nothing against Matt. But Matt hasn't even run a contested supervisor's race. He's been in office. Thurman is the second lowest revenue for the county. We've struggled always. We have no businesses. Matt has businesses in his town, like little business district and that kind of thing. We don't have that. We're largely a bedroom community. We don't even have a gas station. You can't buy a gallon of milk. We've struggled. Budgets were always very tough. Matt has not had a disaster in his town. That can ruin your budget. I just can't emphasize that enough. If you suddenly have $7 million of damage in your entire operating budget for the year is $1.5 million, that's town and highway, you have some serious problems that you need to address. So those were things that are slightly different. Matt and I both sat at the county as well. He's chaired DPW there. I had the police force and emergency services, and those are both huge costs on county budget. Overtime in the jail alone can be brutal on your county budget. So those are things that I had to work at and interface at. Those are experiences that he just hasn't had, and I think they've been extremely valuable for me in terms of giving me perspective on how to really make things work when things are tight and it's difficult.
So this is my last question. I have spoken to so many people who have said, now is not the time for a third party candidate. We need to be focusing on, 2 of the main party candidates, and we can't be distracted. What made you decide to want to run with a third party? And could you inform our viewers and readers a little bit about what the Serve America movement is and kind of what the movement's genesis, goals, and platform?
Okay. So when I originally started this campaign for assembly, I had noted I was a Republican, registered Republican, have been for a very long time. Started going through the endorsement process, which is typical if you're interested in an assembly position. very quickly came to the realization that the process is all that it should be. I did not care for the way the process went forth. It was very closed doors. It was very much based on who you were most friends with, as opposed to what your actual abilities were. So I was quite disheartened with it, and at the time I considered not running. I was on the internet, I was looking around, and if you go on the Board of Elections website, it'll tell you all the constituted parties. And anytime you're getting ready for a run, you go through and you look at all the parties in case you want to have cross endorsement or anything else. And there were these 3 letters that said SAM, and I thought, who names a party Sam? So I was curious. I hopped onto their website, I had a look around, and I have to tell you, I was incredibly impressed. I've been in politics for a lot of years, and it does not matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, there is a whole lot of party alliance, that kind of thing. And it's certainly not emphasized that you think independently of your party, and it doesn't matter which one you're in. You rely on your party to circulate your petitions, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a certain amount of towing the line that's expected of you. This party expects you to serve the people. It expects you to think independently. It expects there to be electoral reform. It was a breath of fresh air. It was very exciting to me. So I contacted the party leadership. Eric Carter happens to originally have come from Warrensburg. He lives downstate now. So first we had to reconnect over, because we both went to the same high school, and I had no idea he was involved in it. We talked more about what the party was about, and they really care about each representative doing what is best for the people they represent. And that really struck a chord with me, because I have in my career made decisions that were not very popular, but they're always based on what is best for the people. So ultimately I decided to change my party, leave the Republican Party. There's many good things, and I'm not saying anything bad about anybody who's a Republican or a Democrat. People are people, and they're entitled to choose what they want, but for me that was no longer the right place to be. So I left and joined a third party. They have been very outspoken. I'm not sure how much you guys are aware that there is new requirements on third parties that were put into place in the budget this year. Okay. Previously, the governor had a commission, and basically they were looking at third party requirements, et cetera, et cetera. The commission's results came back. Obviously, the conservatives and a number of other parties, once they came back, they had 15 days for the legislature to say we don't like them, or they became law. Everybody was mum's the word. Third parties essentially were getting kicked off the ballot, so you would essentially condense it down to the Republicans, the Democrats, and possibly the Conservative Party would be your only options on the ballot. Obviously, the little parties were not so happy about that. They went to court. The court said, no, you can't do that. The governor said, okie dokie. And then when he passed the budget this year, he put it in the budget. And so after November, if your third party is not running a presidential candidate and doesn't get, I think it's like 50,000 votes, or it's a large number of votes on their presidential line, they lose ballot access, which essentially will destroy all the third parties. As far as I'm concerned, that's overly restrictive. I find it very sneaky that we put it in the budget, particularly in light of the fact that the court said, you can't do this. And it's true, he couldn't do it the way he did it, so he turned around and did it a different way. You have to respect that, I suppose. But I don't think it's fair. I don't think most people know about it. I think in the United States we have a right to hold our own political views, whatever they might be. And if we'd like to form a party to express those views, I think the people should have the right to form it. I may not want to join it, but they have the right to form it. And to remove the right from the people to form a party, I think is just fundamentally wrong. It doesn't uphold our constitutional values. I am a huge fan of personal liberty and, personal choice. And so I am running on the Sam party line. The Sam party, I have to tell you, is great. I was on the Republican committee for many years in Warren County, and I've never seen a neater group of people than the Sam party. They get together. Of course, it's Zoom now, and we're all trying to do Zoom meetings. But there's fantastic discussion about weighted vote and the value of weighted vote and ranked choice voting, which, some of the states are now moving to ranked choice voting. And so this party is having these wonderful discussions about, what should we do looking forward to expand access to the people. So I'm very happy to be joining them. I know that there are some people who think we should not have a third party, this isn't the time, but I personally think we should not be consolidating power in two parties, that we should have it open for as many options so that people have the right to choose. And they can choose, they could choose a Republican or a Democrat, or they could choose the same party, whatever they want, but I think they should have the choice.
So voting has already begun around the state.
Yes.
And how do you think the presumable increase in both absentee and early voting is going to affect the outcome of this election?
It's going to be different. Generally speaking, however your voting on election day goes, usually your absentees will trend that way. I think we're going to see that change this year. Looking back at the primary, we did some mailing and some absentee voting, and I can speak for the Sam party. We had districts where people voted in our primary, and there were substantially more people who voted than we had registered voters. So they were unable to certify the election results until very late in the summer, almost fall. And at that point, I think it came down to, we can't tell whose ballot is who, we're just going to call it like it is. And so I think that there is going to be a struggle with all of the additional, it's going to be an avalanche of absentee ballots. And if you've ever sat in on opening of absentees, and I've sat in that's an arduous process. I don't know that our boards of elections are going to be ready for that. It's just going to be so huge. The staffing is really going to be a challenge for them. I can't think of any board of election that's flush with staff and lots of people who were trained and ready and experienced to meet this challenge. But I know that the boards of elections will certainly do as best they can, but it's going to be a really hard year to be in the election office this year.
And my final question for you, Evelyn, is what was your reaction to Tuesday night's presidential debate?
I'm going to say that I was a little bit sad in that I like to see dignity and statesmanship in politics. You can disagree, but when we got down into the name calling and telling everybody to shut up, and that for me really turned me off. Both candidates want to be president of the United States, and I guess I expect better from everybody, including the moderator a little bit too. I thought the moderator, I've been in some debates and the League of Women Voters was much more professional, I guess I'm going to go with during that. So I was a little disappointed in it. I think that both candidates had strengths and weaknesses, but it was just kind of, to me, I guess it was a little bit more of a free-for-all and not what I expect out of a presidential debate.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us that you think our readers and viewers would like to know about your candidacy and about yourself before we conclude?
I would just ask them to consider a third party this year. What we've been doing hasn't worked well for us. We're still short on internet. Our roads still need improvement. I think it's time, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and get the same result, it's crazy to continue to do it. I think we need to do something different this year and get a fresh set of eyes down there.
Well, thank you very much for coming and
Thank
visiting
you so
us
much
today.
for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and good luck with the election.
Yes, thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you.